after going through what we went through over the last couple of years with the P word and the jabs and all this stuff, I think we need to recognize another condition that's been going around, and this one's actually been around longer, and it's worse. I think it's ruined more relationships and caused more heart attacks than anything. And it's called TDS. It's really, really bad. It causes veins to show right here in your neck. They start popping out. I've seen some instances where veins you could see through people's foreheads. People lose their voice from screaming because it causes excruciating, I guess, pain. I don't know. It's never been described to me as pain, but the people are always screaming and screeching. I know it's caused a few heart attacks because people just get really, really high anxiety. I've definitely seen a lot of issues with people attacking others, so it maybe has some like rabies effects to it. But I'm gonna finally add my Cash App to this channel because I really think that it's incumbent upon me to raise money for people who are sufferers of TDS. So I'm gonna add my Cash App to the description, in the description, maybe even on my little graphic. But I feel terrible for these people because they can't control it. There's no way to avoid getting it other than actually listening to the news and watching the news. More importantly, reading the news. I've learned that it's much harder to get those little modifier words in the news if it's in print, because you can see them. You can see them. You'll see the words, the adjectives describing things versus just giving you the straight up, hey, this is what happened. But if somebody watches, say, MSNBC, CNN, if they read the New York Times, Washington Post, LA Times, if they're part of any of these publications, or worse, all of them, that's the more of those publications you're a part of, the worse your TDS is. And there's no booster for TDS. So I'm not sure if there's a cure other than speaking to somebody who's smarter than they are. And not necessarily smarter, just more informed overall on current events, news, politics. Definitely in politics. Economics. These are people who typically don't know anything about economics. But there are a lot who are blinded by the TDS, so it definitely affects their vision and their ability to separate. What it does is it meshes people's emotions with their ability to separate issues that they may see arising. And what is this? TDS. What does TDS stand for? But we'll get to that. The queen of TDS is a woman named Letitia Jones, or is it James? Letitia James. And she is a somehow Attorney General in New York City, I believe. Maybe New York State. I don't know. This woman ran for the position 3 years ago, almost 4 years ago. She ran for Attorney General on the sole platform of getting Donald Trump.
I will never be afraid to challenge this illegitimate president.
After all, Trump's company is headquartered in New York.
Beautiful.
And so was his 2016 campaign.
What is fueling my soul right now is Trump and his abuses against immigrants, against women, against our environment.
Among the many items that James has said she will look into, Trump's finances and his real estate holdings, including any potential money laundering, which James has said she believes there's evidence Trump has engaged in.
President Trump was almost on the verge of bankruptcy, and then all of a sudden he was flush with money.
They should be operating on the law, not using the law to take someone down. if you're using the law to take someone down, to me, that would be an indication of abuse of power and unconstitutionality. Is that a word? We'll just say it's unconstitutional. And I don't see how somebody is guilty before proven innocent versus being innocent until proven guilty. Because in her mind, he was guilty. She was going to make sure and prove that he was guilty. And he never had a chance. She never even offered the possibility that he was innocent. And to me, that's a problem, and that oozes corruption.
James campaigned on passing a bill to change New York's double jeopardy laws to allow her to pursue state charges against anyone the president were to grant a federal pardon. She plans to continue an ongoing probe into whether Trump has violated the Constitution's Emoluments Clause, which says federal officials cannot accept gifts from foreign powers without congressional approval. And James's office will continue the lawsuit brought by the previous AG against the president, the Donald J. Trump Foundation, and 3 of his adult children. Trump and Trump Foundation officials deny any wrongdoing.
I don't see how somebody can run for office based on that as a platform, especially as somebody that they don't know. They just don't like, and it's based on that virus that I talked about. Oh, sorry, it's not a virus. I think it's I don't know what it is. It's a neuro condition, that TDS. Did I say what TDS is yet? No, I don't think I did. It's called Trump Derangement Syndrome. And what people end up doing is they will stop talking to family members, disown them just because Trump. That's it. Nothing about Trump specifically. It's just Trump. You're a Trump supporter. I'm not a Trump supporter. Trump's doing what I asked him to do via my vote. Oh my God, he's a Nazi. How do you not see he's a Nazi? So what ends up happening is this thing gets into people and it just destroys relationships. So with this TDS, we have this woman who's been going after. She's been investigating Donald Trump for 3 years.
We must do our job to ensure that the man currently occupying the Oval Office is held accountable to any and everything he has done.
These people are...
The president, meanwhile, is already previewing his argument against James, chalking it all up to politics, calling James an attorney general who openly campaigned on a Get Trump agenda.
Well, right before her term is over, which would be this November, she magically concludes her investigation. And what does she do? She says he committed fraud, banking fraud, and tax fraud, tax evasion.
I am announcing that today we are filing a lawsuit against Donald Trump for violating the law as part of his efforts to generate profits for himself, his family, and his company. The complaint demonstrates that Donald Trump falsely inflated his net worth by billions of dollars to unjustly enrich himself and to cheat the system, thereby cheating all of us. He did this with the help of the other defendants, his children, Donald Trump Jr., Ivanka Trump, and Eric Trump, and former Trump Organization CFO Alan Weisselberg and Trump Organization Controller Jeffrey McConney. Mr. Trump and the Trump Organization repeatedly and persistently manipulated the value of assets to induce banks to lend money to the Trump Organization on more favorable terms than would otherwise have been available to the company.
But the banks aren't a part of it. The banks aren't a part of it, and the loans are all paid back. So what is this really about? Really? Is this about just the taxes? If it's about the taxes, the IRS should be heading this up. Or she should be doing it on behalf of the IRS. She shouldn't be referring it to the IRS. Again, The banks aren't a part of this suit. They are not suing Donald Trump. The banks got all their money back.
We show that they violated several state criminal laws, including falsifying business records, issuing false financial statements, insurance fraud, and engaging in a conspiracy to commit each of these state law violations.
Of course, she's charging him criminally with those things, right? No. So he committed all these felonies, and hear her tell it, it's at least 10 felonies. But she's not going to charge him for the felonies. She's seeking $250 million. So here's the weird part about this. If somebody commits armed robbery and say they steal the money from, we'll just say CVS, right? They commit armed robbery on a CVS, and you're able to prove that they committed armed robbery at a CVS. The police show up at their home, or if they catch them in the act, it's even better. But typically the police will show up at their home, take them to jail, lock them up. They'll go through their regular court proceedings, figure out if there's going to be a bail, blah, 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 blah. But the charges are going to be criminal charges. So you're going to have felonies, very likely for the weapon, very, very likely for the actual robbery. And you'll go through that process. If you're found guilty, then CVS can go after them civilly. So somehow they were able to prove, or plead, but somehow they're able to prove, hey, that wasn't me. I have a twin brother, and I can prove where I was, and they get off for the armed robbery. Then CVS will go after the brother. Now, they can still go after you and say, hey, he was complicit, blah, 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 blah. But the point is, typically, you'll get the criminal charge if it's the government who's filing the charge. Typically, I know he did this felony, this felony, this felony, this felony, and this felony. You won't say, but we're not going to charge him for it. We just want the money back. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? I don't know about this one.
As a result of these violations, we are asking the court to, among other things, permanently bar Mr. Trump, Donald Trump Jr., Ivanka Trump, Eric Trump, from serving as an officer or director in any corporation or similar entity registered and or licensed in New York. To bar Mr. Trump and the Trump Organization from entering into any New York State commercial real estate acquisition or from applying for loans from any financial institution in New York for 5 years. To pay for the financial benefits obtained as a result of the persistent fraudulent practices at an estimated $250 million. And towards the end of my remarks, I will go into the other relief that we are seeking.
You have to wonder why, and you're up here, you did a press conference to make this announcement. You're up here claiming as a state of fact, and she said a few times objective. She used the word objective. He objectively did this. He objectively overstated that. That means you have proof. Why aren't you charging him? Why wouldn't you charge him with the crime that you're up there saying all of these things? Why aren't you charging him with these crimes, with these felonies? How can you get up there? I don't know how this is legal. To not say, hey, we found evidence that this is the case that she made to the people is the one she should have made to a grand jury for indictment. Instead, she just made a claim, we're going to sue him civilly. He's committed all these crimes, but we're not going to charge him. We're going to sue him civilly. And we're going to hope somehow he incriminates himself, and that'll open a door to a criminal investigation. What that means is you don't have proof of anything you're saying, or you don't have enough proof to get a conviction. That's what that means. What are you doing? You're up for re-election. Your only campaign promise was to get Trump, to lock him up. That was your only campaign promise. You didn't say, I'm gonna prosecute gun crimes in New York City more than ever before. I'm gonna make sure loitering for homeless people actually gets enforced in the city of New York. None of that. Your one campaign promise was to get Trump. You had a severe case of TDS. So you didn't come through with it, and it's election time. And all the other people who had TDS are looking like, hey, wait a minute. I thought you were supposed to lock this guy up. What happened? And when you start saying, well, he's Teflon, that stuff doesn't work. Because they said, no. You ran for public office and said you were going to do this one thing. You didn't do it. What did she do? Okay, well, then we'll just file civilly. And for all the people who don't understand the difference between criminal charges and civil charges, will think I'm making good on my campaign promise. You're not. You're lying to. You're hoping those people are ignorant, and you're lying to the constituency that got you in office, that you promised you would do this thing. You couldn't do the thing, you failed, so you did this other thing that looks like this thing, and you're just hoping nobody calls you on it, because they also have TDS, so they're thinking, well, that's better than nothing, for the ones who understand what you're doing. For the ones who don't understand what you're doing, thinking, yeah, he's finally going to prison. I had somebody text me and say, oh, he's finally going to jail. Based on what? They said he lied about this. Okay, so he's being criminally charged. They're actually going through with it. Yep. And of course I look at it and it's like, no, that's civil. They're trying to get $250 million from him. How is this legal that this woman can do that and use New York's resources for that? New York City resources are being wasted on going after this guy because it's a liberal city and everyone agrees that they don't like him, they can do stuff like this. When she's justifying the civil suit, not the charges, the civil suit, as she's justifying them, she's bringing up stuff in Florida.
Mar-a-Lago was valued on the false premise that it sat on unrestricted property and could be developed for residential use. However, Mr. Trump knew that Mar-a-Lago was subject to a host of onerous restrictions and limitations. Mr. Trump himself signed deeds sharply restricting changes to the property and donating his residential development rights in an effort to get a tax deduction and later to lower his property taxes on the property.
She's bringing up stuff in D.C.
These statements were integral to Mr. Trump and the Trump Organization's ability to secure loans for a number of properties, including the old post office in Washington, D.C.
So believe it if you want, that's fine. I'm just letting you know there's zero chance of him going to jail from this suit that this prosecutor, that this attorney general brought forward. Zero. No chance, unless he somehow incriminates himself and then they can bring forward some kind of criminal charges, which he's just going to keep pleading the fifth. Like, I mean, She even did something else illegal and unconstitutional. When he pled the fifth, she used that against him. Now, I guess because it's the court of public opinion, you can do that. But she used him pleading the fifth, exercising a constitutional right against him as if that is a sign of guilt.
And when asked about these meetings under oath as part of our deposition, both men, Mr. Trump and Mr. Weisselberg, invoked their Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination, and they refused to answer. When asked under oath if he, Mr. Trump, continued to review and approve the statements after becoming President of the United States in 2017, Mr. Trump, again, invoked his Fifth Amendment privilege and refused to answer.
So if you do that in court and there's a jury, they'll say, hey, just so you know, somebody pleading the fifth is a right, and it is in no way, shape, or form an admission of guilt. She stood up there and used it as an admission of guilt. He pled the fifth and would not answer the question. Yeah, that's what it is. That's what the fifth is. But she made it seem like a negative, and I don't understand how that's ethical. I don't see how that's that seems to me to be trying to sway a possible jury in her criminal or in her civil suit. And I mean, prejudicial isn't even the word. I just don't understand how that's legal. And I know it happens all the time. I get it. But she is the Attorney General. And I just think I think it's criminal what she's doing and what she did, because she ran on going after a citizen. And now that she's trailing in her current race, she magically concludes and says, we're not charging him, but we sent referrals to the IRS and we sent referrals to the federal government. As if the IRS and federal government, the IRS was auditing him at the beginning of his campaign. If they found anything, they would have went through with it. They would have pursued it. Same with the federal government. They've been investigating this man in his entire life for 5-6 years now. So her referrals are just garbage. No one's going to take them up. And she's crooked.